Okay, so I've given it my input fields. I'm going to hit submit. But what it does is it firstly calls the SERP. So it gathers all the listings on page 1 for the target keyword that we've put in, then calls reference URL, calls our internal links for our service pages. We've got 2 there. These code nodes then extracts that data, puts it into a merge node. This is then run through a couple of more sort of technical bits, not super interesting, but this data is essentially then run into our AI agent. And this is the exciting node, really. This is the node that creates the actual content. We've also hooked it up to Perplexity. So this means that Perplexity will mine the target keyword for facts, figures, stats, insights, everything that we can use to strengthen the article, basically. The AI agent has now created our content. We can see it on the right-hand side here, and this is all looking pretty good. Performance Marketing 2025, Beginner's Guide, actually talking about AI research tools. We know that it's fairly recent as well. If I scroll to the bottom, we can also see that we've got a load of sources from Perplexity, which is great. So they're only going to strengthen the article. And as I go through this, I can actually see some references to those. So according to Statista, this is looking pretty good. Now, the one thing I will also add is always have a copy editor go through this, give it their human touch, give it the human nuance, maybe configure some of your internals, etc., etc. But this gives you a pretty good base level article. And one thing I will also add as well, we've got our guardrails at the top here. We've got our system message down at the bottom. You can tweak this, but as I go through the video, I'll talk through sort of how we build all of this, but I just want to jump to the end to give you a bit of insight into what it looks like. So what then happens is I get a Slack message. The Slack notification looks a little bit like this, and I can open up our article, and there we have our finished article, basically. So from those series of inputs, it's only taken a couple of minutes, and it's actually produced an article that looks a little bit like this. So as I said, I think it's really worth sticking around to seeing how this gets created. Even if you download the workflow, you import it into n8n, I think you still want to understand how we got to this point. So if you do run into issues, you've got more of a working knowledge as to what all of the nodes do, and that will help you diagnose the problems and things like that. I've only used Claude and GPT-5 to help build this. I'm not a developer. So join me for the ride. I am currently building quite a few of these out. I've got a whole list that I want to work through, but if there's something that you really want to see built in n8n, let me know in the comments and I'll add it to my list. Now, if you're not that interested in learning how to build this, that's absolutely fine. If you click the link in the description, you'll be taken to a Notion board where you can quite simply download this. But what I will say is that even if you want to download and use this, and I've downloaded loads of workflows in the past, I think there's so much value in understanding how these workflows are built. And in this video, I will go through step by step, problem by problem, resolution by resolution, showing you how every single node is built using only GPT-5 and Claude. I have no developer experience, and that will be very clear as you go through the video. Every single issue that I come across, I try and troubleshoot with AI. And I think this is so important because I've watched a number of videos around n8n. It's how I learn how to use it. It was my introduction into it, was via YouTube and video and things like that. And I feel like a lot of the issues are glossed over quite a lot. And for me, when I was watching these videos, I wanted to know how they got from A to B, B to C, C to D. I didn't want to know how they went from A to D straight away. But other than that, let's get into it. Okay, so before we begin, as ever, I think it's super important that you map exactly what or exactly how you want this workflow to work on a whiteboard. And this doesn't need to be technical in any sense. We just need to get whatever's out in your head down on paper, because this really helps from a structural point of view. So let's have a look at this. So the input, I want to be able to add a keyword. I want to be able to add a reference URL to look for things like tone of voice. I then want to add opportunities for internal links. So this means that I'm going to add maybe sort of 1 to 2 service pages just to keep it sort of nice and easy for this. And then I'm also going to add the country that I want the keyword to be reviewed in, right? So this is going to be a form up here. Now, there's already a handful of APIs that I'm already thinking about using. So to crawl Google SERP, I like to use something called the SERP API. You can use things like Apify and things like that. I just quite like SERP API traditionally. What else have we got here? So to check sort of insights, we're going to use Perplexity. Perplexity is obviously great for finding facts and figures and stats and sort of bits and pieces like that. I have used other models such as Jira in the past that have also been great. What we're then going to do is have the system merge all of this. So it's going to pull all these external factors together. We're then going to push this through into a content agent that's going to have a prompt that I'm going to give it using the inputs that we've provided with the prompt. And then that is essentially then going to give us a Google Doc output. We're going to use a human in the loop. So this means when the document is created, I'm going to get a notification on Slack, which will be a simple approve, disapprove. And then once approved, we're going to aim to upload this to the CMS as well. So a basic WordPress CMS. So we've got a number of different sort of activities here. We've got our input at the top, then we've got our research section, then we've got our content agent, our human in the loop, and then we're going to go live. I've then given this to Claude, and Claude has given me an output, which is here. So quite simply, I just need to download the JSON and then come into your blank n8n instance. Should look a little bit like this. And then what we're going to do is just import from file. Cool. And as you can see, it's attempted to build something that does look quite a lot like the sort of whiteboard creation that we did at the start. So cool. Okay. So we've got a very sort of base structure. We're going to have to make some amends to the input form. We're obviously going to have to connect up our APIs as well as the SERP API. Got quite a few extractions. I imagine the final result will look very, very different to this. We do have our content agent, which is great. And as mentioned, this is very much an outline. This is very much like the foundation. Once we come to populating it, problem solving along the way, hopefully this will look very streamlined. So what I'm going to do is actually start with the input form. Okay, so what I've done is I've just created an n8n form, and I've just added the fields that we outlined in our whiteboard. So target keyword, the reference URL for tone, a service page URL, sort of one as a minimum, and I've added a second one as a non-required field. Obviously you can add as many as you like, really. And then the country. So we're also using the Google GL parameter. This is what SERP API uses to understand the country of the Google results that we want to scrape. So in this instance, obviously it's the UK. So now what we need to do is build a system that can crawl this data and extract all the relevant points and then merge it into this one node before passing it to our content agent. Okay, so I've just jumped into Claude just to get a bit of advice on the best next step. What we're going to do is create a code node. And then this has given me the code that it's going to want to execute. So this should split the files into these different JSON files here. And then from there, we can then split it into the various different other nodes for extraction. Okay, so we have a small issue at the moment that the code node won't execute whenever any of our nodes, even if they're not currently in use, is showing a red X. So what I'm going to do is actually just clear some of these out for the time being, and then just rebuild as we get to them. Okay, so this now should allow me to run the test node, which means I can input my fields and then pin it along the way, which was the original plan. So I'm just going to fill in some mock data here. Piece of advice with this as well, when you choose your reference URL, try and make sure that it's not a URL that's being created by AI, because you will then have an AI creating an article based on AI, and the whole thing would just be AI. So dig into the archives and find something that has been human written. Cool, so what have we got here? Keyword, what performance marketing? Reference URL is an article we wrote. What are backlinks? One of the service pages is just an old PPC page. Another is an old SEO page, and we're looking at the UK. So we're going to hit submit on this. Cool, and as you can see in the corner down here, we've had a successful submission from the form side, but of course it's the code's got nowhere to go. So that's absolutely fine. So what we're going to do is pin this data, which means we don't have to keep filling in that form at the start to test run the node. Cool, so if we dive into the code node, now the beauty with n8n is it is very much a drag and drop builder. So we can see that the code Claude has given us what it's tried to do. So what I'm going to attempt to do is just replace the JSON it's given with the JSON that the form has spat out here by simply dragging and dropping the file from the left-hand side into the middle here. Now, a good thing to remember as just a general practice as to how n8n works, the left-hand side is the input, the middle is very much the brain, so the control center of the node, and the right is the output. So you'd always put in from the left, create in the middle, and then push it to the right-hand side with the output. Okay, so we're still getting some errors. So what we're going to do is pass this to Claude and ask it to diagnose it for us. Cool, and what we've done is just copy and pasted the code that Claude has given us, and now we have a success message on the right-hand side, which is fantastic, and that means that we can now pin this bit, and we can unpin this. So as we go along, we'll just keep pinning the data, and that means we can, as mentioned, pull the same data all the way through and test as we go along. Cool. Okay, the next thing is we now need to split the different parts of this into the workflow. Cool, so what we're going to do is now bring these 3 HTTP nodes in to the workflow. We're going to get rid of these nodes here. I'm actually just going to break these off for the time being. Cool, so this is going to be the SERP API node. So what I'm going to do is just grab an API key that we can use. Very helpfully, n8n's actually got a list of defined credentials. So because I've got SERP API set up in another workflow, I could quite easily just select SERP API and then the SERP API account I've already set up. If you didn't have one set up, just simply click create new credentials, jump into SERP API and then get API key to add in down here. What I'm now going to do is pull the inputs that we've been given from the code node over into my brain in the middle here. So this one will be keyword. Let's get rid of that and pull target keyword into here. Location, again, we're going to get rid of that and pull the, okay, we've got the country here. I have a feeling though that we actually need the Google GL parameter, but let's see how we get on with this. I'm going to get rid of SERP API key and num. I'm not too sure what that is. I'm going to get rid of that for the time being, because we are connected to our SERP API account. I only want to have a look at the keyword and the location. Okay, I've got an error here, so we're going to troubleshoot this. Oh, okay, I've gone to troubleshoot it, and it's actually given me the fields that I need here. So, okay, target keyword. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what I've done is I've just added the exact fields that have been outlined by Claude into here. Now, obviously, one concern is that the Google GL here is saying US. We need to make sure that that's the UK, so I'm just going to double check on that. Cool, and out of that, it's actually told me to update my code node so that it recognizes the country that I've put in. And actually you can see here that I should be putting in GB instead of UK. So I'm going to unpin this and then execute. And now I'm going to repin based on that. Now let's rerun the node so we can get the inputs back from the left-hand side. Okay, so I just had to rerun the form again with all the same fields, because when I pinned the code node and then unpinned it subsequently, I didn't have any of the form data to pass all the way through, which is fine, it happens. So what I'm going to do now is, it looks like I still need to add my API key down here, so what I'm going to do is add that and then rerun it. Okay, so we had a small error with Claude that basically said that the location parameter was causing the error. So we did as it instructed, we removed the location parameter, and now we've got our data successfully passing through to the right-hand side. So what we're going to do now is work on just building these 3 other nodes, the crawl reference URL and the 2 service URLs. Okay, so what I've done is I've added the reference URL and I've added both service URLs, which were outlined in the original sort of skeleton that Claude gave us. I've then just copied across the very simple JSON URL that it's instructed me to here. I run execute step and I've just pinned the data. So now we've got the input from our form split off into 4 different directions, which is exactly what we want. So on to the next step. So next step following the HTTP nodes is to add a code node to extract the data as has been outlined here. So for each of these, we're going to have an extract code node that's actually going to pull the relevant data that we want. So again, I'm just going to break this off just so I've got a bit of flexibility. What I've done, I've just connected the extract SERP data and I've hit execute step. I'm going to run it one more time, just sort of prove it to you guys. And you can see on the right-hand side here that it's starting to pull through what looks like Google's first page for the target keyword. Where is it down here? What is performance marketing? So performance marketing in 2025, beginner's guide. We've got the link, we've got Google's redirect URL. And as we scroll down position 2, we've got an Adobe URL. Position 3, we've got Salesforce URL. This looks pretty good. So it looks like it's actually pulled Google's first page, which is what we wanted it to. So this looks like the SERP API node is doing exactly what we want it to. So I'm just going to pin this. Now we're going to run the same, do the same process for the extract tone for the reference URL. So we're going to put the exact code in. I'm going to replace the code that's in here, connect it with the reference URL and hit execute step. And we've got a success message here. So now I'm going to do the same for the internal extraction. Okay, so it actually looks like we can connect the service URLs directly to the merge node because we're not extracting anything from the page. We're just using the URL that's already been given to it. So I think had we connected the home page and said, find the service URLs, then we would connect an extraction node to pull the relevant URLs, then put it into the merge, but we've essentially saved it the job. So I'm cheating a little bit maybe, but it does make the workflow a little bit simpler. So if you wanted to do this at scale and you had hundreds of service pages, for example, then there might be another step here, which is to add the extraction node, but we don't need to do it because we already have the URL. Makes sense, I think. Of course, what we're going to do now is connect all of the, so I'm actually just going to get rid of these for ease, and we're going to connect all of this into a merge node. So as mentioned, it is very much following this, this sort of workflow, which is quite interesting. I'm sure there's hundreds of different ways that this can be built, but it's starting to make quite a lot of sense, which is good. So I've connected them, set mode combine, merge by position, merge by position. We're going to run an execution. And it looks like it's pulled 3 of 3, but not 4. Because even though we've got a success message, I don't want a false positive. So I'm just going to check with Claude that this looks right. And I'm also just going to give it context as to what we're looking like here. Oh, interesting. The merge node is showing 3, but you have 4. It's a limitation of how the merge node works in merge by position. Can only handle a number of items from the smallest input set. So change the combination mode from merge by position to append. Let's give that a go first. Okay, so what we've done is we've done as instructed. We've connected 2 of the nodes to one merge, and then that merge to another merge, plus our 2 service URLs into this second merge here. What I'm going to do is just rerun this merge, just so it should give us a drop down of 2. So there's 2 items there. I'm hoping that's correct. Yeah, that looks good. So we've got our top results and we can see that it's got our people also are, so it's definitely pulled Google data. And then down here, I can see that it's also pulled our session media voice backlinks. So that bit looks good. We're going to pin that. Now let's rerun our second merge. Okay, so this took a fair bit of troubleshooting. Now, remember, if you don't want to go through the pain of actually building this, I give you this all for free. Whatever this finished article is going to look like, because I don't know yet, you can just click the link in the description and download it, right? You do not have to go through this pain, but if you stuck with me for this long, I appreciate it. So we did the merge on the merge, which is what n8n told us to do. But oddly, we were still only getting data from one service page. I actually don't know which one. So it's missing the second one. I think it was crawl service 2. So I think this goes in order. So Claude told me to add a code node after the merge, as this will manually fetch the missing data. So we've done that. I put the code in, I've executed the step, and I thought this would just say, yeah, it's working, success, another false positive. But actually, I think it's pulled everything. So we've got the SERP here. I've got my tone article, my backlinks articles, a reference URL. I've got my service 1. So that looks good. And then I've got my service 2. And I've still got my target keyword and country down here. So I believe this has got everything now, which is fantastic. So we can move on to the next step. Okay, so the next steps, we need to start bringing Perplexity into this. Perplexity is going to add deep research, insights, facts, figures, just all the data that we need to make the article that much stronger. And then after that, we're going to be bringing in our content agent. So let's add the Perplexity node. Of course, I had to delete everything at the start, which is great. Let's grab this from Claude because I'm lazy. So step 5, add Perplexity research nodes. This is another HTTP request. Add the URL, add the authentication, add the JSON, and then I assume at some point I'm going to have to connect OpenRouter. And yeah, going to have to connect to OpenRouter and then subsequently connect it to Perplexity. So let's crack on with that now. I'm sure you guys know all this or can figure it out, but if you need an OpenRouter API key, just Google OpenRouter, sign in, create a key, add it into the API key, and save. Should be quite straightforward. And as I said, we can then use multiple models from this single source, which is really cool. Of course, what I've done is I've taken the body, I've gone to body content JSON, I've literally just pasted the exact code. I've not added any of this into the expression down here, hit execute step. And it looks like it's pulls from relevant data. So we've got, if I scroll down here, got annotations, we've got a URL, 3, 4 annotations, citations. It's definitely done something. We're not quite sure what yet. But then again, I haven't given it really any prompt outside of the data that it's got from the inputs from the previous code nodes. So it has an idea of the target keyword. It's had my tone and the service URLs, but that's about it. I haven't actually given it the prompt as to what I want to do with this. So this step feels a little bit immature. It feels like it's come a little bit early, and it should run alongside the content agent when that gets executed. But let's see, we might end up moving it around anyway, but it's been successful. So we know that it works, which is great. So again, I'm just going to pin that. So one of n8n's greatest evolutions is the introduction of an AI agent, which means that you can tell it to use certain tools and softwares with defined prompts and things like that. So it's a really good way to take multiple inputs, to use multiple different tools all at one time, basically. What we're going to use it for is to give it all the context from our inputs on top of the Perplexity research, and then give it a prompt to use that and also structure a piece of content based on the guidance and the rules that I provide it. So if I have a look at this isn't quite right, I don't believe. So it comes to plus, select AI agent. And then what you should do is have a node that looks a bit like this with chat model, memory, and tool. What I'm gonna do is just connect the Perplexity data straight into the AI agent. Now, as mentioned, I feel that that node is a little bit premature, but let's see how we get on. The chat model, I'm going to add the open routed chat model. And for writing, I like to use Claude 3.7. Of course, totally up to you what you want to use, but I think this remains the best in the business for actual content writing. And then when it comes to the prompts, there's sort of two parts to this. So in the user message, we want to provide the guardrails, essentially like the do's and the don'ts. And then the system message, we want to give it the actual prompt, i.e., create the content. So I've got this prepared, and obviously if you've downloaded the workflow, you'll be able to see exactly what this looks like, but I'll just run through it. Okay, so I've just run a quick sense check with Claude. Unsurprisingly, it agrees with me that really what we need to do here is merge both of these nodes and then connect the merge node into the AI agent. And that means that it's getting the data from the code node, which is all our inputs, as well as the data from Perplexity, which is the research. So I'm going to just add a code node, add a merge node here rather than connect the merge node into the agent. Just connected the code node and the Perplexity node into the merge node. Let's execute this and see what it comes out with. Okay, this looks pretty good. It's got our annotations, our citations. Just make sure it's got both of our service lines. Looks like it does, which is great. Our sample text and our SERP data. So this looks fantastic. I'm then going to do, let's connect our merge node to this. And whilst that's been running, I've just asked Claude to refine my prompts, basically. Yeah, so it looks good. The user message, so this is more of the guardrails. Okay, there's a lot of variables it's putting in here, which makes me a bit nervous, but then I can have more confidence that they're at least being used. Now, I like to give it a bit of structure like this. If I'm being honest, AI rarely sticks exactly to this, but I think it's good to just define the sections and chunk them as much as you can, really. Okay, I think this looks okay. Let's give it a test run. So system message, it's a little bit back to front, but that's okay. Then the user message, the guardrails go in at the top. So we can already see that it's not recognizing some of this, which is fine. I can probably I could probably pull across some of this. So tone analysis. Okay, let's run this and see what it gives us. Small plug. Whilst I'm waiting for this to execute, remember, you can have the completed workflow that will be error-free, stress-free, blood, sweat and tears free if you click the link in the description and subscribe. Okay, so we've got an output and it looks pretty comprehensive, and I can also see that there's some data in there, whether it's correct or not, but there's something in there. It's got a key takeaways, which again is kind of what we outline. It's pulled in some data, and I've actually got a reference there, marketed 2023. So this is looking pretty good for a first shot. Just because I know how we create content, and I know from a structure point of view, we have the key takeaways, and we can see some of the perplexity data being pulled through. So I'm actually pretty happy with this. So from a raw data point of view, we've actually got our completed article here. So the next steps are now pushing it into a Google Doc, have the Google Doc then send a notification to Slack to give me the option to approve or disapprove. But we've got the raw data here. Now, if you've seen my previous video on automating internal linking, I got to the sort of end result in about 30% of the time. Then my biggest challenge actually came from putting it into a blooming Google Sheet. So hopefully we don't have the same issues again, but let's see how we get on. So pretty happy with that. It's gone surprisingly smoothly, almost too smoothly so far. So let's see how we get on now. One thing that I forgot was, of course, that I had Claude pretty much build out the rest of this. Doesn't look like it's got the Slack integration, but that's fine. It's given us the Google Docs creation. So add a Google Docs node, create, put in the title and content. I can spell Google right, that'd be great. Create document. Oh, fantastic, it's already pulled it through. What I don't actually have is the title defined. So I might actually need a node that splits off the title and the meta and everything from the actual article. So then I can pass the title into this section here. So I might need one more step. Yeah, it doesn't recognize it, that's fine. I'm gonna ask GPT-5 to split this up into the title, the meta, and then the actual content output, and then I'll pass it into a Google Doc node. Okay, cool, GPT's given me an output. We're on a good run of one-hit wonders at the moment. Let's see if we can get another. Amazing. So we've got a title, meta, and we've got the content. That's exactly what we wanted. Now we're gonna add our Google Doc node, create document, title. We now have a title node. So that node's obviously created the document. This one is then to edit the document, which makes sense. Update document, okay. Cool. So that looks like it's done it. So what I've done is I dragged the content from the code node into the text here, into the text field, and obviously I've added the ID into the doc ID field, and it looks like it has pushed it all into here. Now this is looking incredibly comprehensive. (1600 words), pretty happy with that. And then if we have a look at Open Router, so I'm curious as to the total cost to generate all of that. So 0.84 of a cent. Crazy. Okay, so I had to spend a little bit of time troubleshooting some of these nodes, but we've got to a final result that works, and that's the main thing. So a couple of small nuances here, and again, I just used Claude and GPT-5 to help me navigate through all of this. You know, when we first started this workflow, there was no way I was anticipating to have a merge on a merge into a code node, to split out into my Open Route HTTP request into another merge, and then into another code node before we actually get to our AI agent. I mean, it's certainly quite some way from the whiteboard mock-up that we had right at the start, right? But a couple of things that I think be interesting for you anyway is that oddly, the AI agent was creating 2 articles every single time. So duplicate the article. I'm not really too sure why this was happening. I think it was something to do with the merge data. I don't know. That's what AI told me anyway. So we added in this code node that essentially flattens it. And that just means that it sends 1 item to the agent and only 1 article subsequently has been produced. So what I'm going to do is actually just execute this step and then talk you through the last sort of couple of nodes here. What I'm going to do is actually now run this node here. We can see that the AI agent has created an output for us on the right hand side. If we scroll down, we can see that we've also got some external sources, which is really good. So it looks like bits from Perplexity are putting through. We've got some stats there, which are looking really nice. So it sort of looks like it's come together. And the one thing I would always recommend is have a copy editor go through it anyway, and just give it that human nuance, add your sort of finishing touch to it. But the base of the article should be pretty strong. Now what we've got here is the actual document has been created and the metadata is on the right hand side here. So what I'm going to do is actually try and find this document. Cool. So the document exists and there's nothing in it as expected. We've got our title up here, which should match the title. Yeah, from the output, Future of Market Research. That's fine. Obviously it says 2024, so we'll need to tidy that up in the copy editing process. But it's created the document. So in this next node here, this is actually where the content gets added to the document. So when I execute this step, we should see any minute, there we go, the content actually get added directly into the document. So I think the one thing to bear in mind with n8n is it's very much step by step, and if something such as creating a document with content needs to be done in n8n, it's likely that it will take a couple of steps to get there. Now, once this is done, I then want to pass it into Slack so our copy editor can get a notification of it and start copy editing it, basically. So I will come onto this URL node here, but firstly, if you go to Tools, Slack, and then if you go to send a message, it's the send a message node, and then the send and wait response, that is the operation that you're looking for. And of course the resource should be the message. So if I come into one I did earlier, I've obviously connected this to my Slack account. I've got a previous video on how to do that. It's very, very straightforward. Just hit the pen here and then this will take you through to the Slack admin API and you can set up your bot to trigger. So we've got the send and wait response. This basically means that it will send a notification into Slack and then the user has the option to approve or disapprove. And this is essentially right at the end of the workflow. Now, the one reason we have the create document URL is whenever the update document node is complete, you can see that the output is just the document ID. So as a user, you can't actually select this document ID, and that would mean navigating into your external drive or into one of your Google Drives to try and find it, and that adds a layer of friction into the process that we don't want. So the create document URL actually pulls through the Google Doc URL and pushes it directly into Slack. So what I'm now going to do is execute this step, and what should happen is that I should get a notification in my Slack channel. I've only got this sending to me at the moment, so I won't actually get the pop-up. I'll have to manually open it and give me the option to approve and disapprove, and then this will essentially conclude the workflow. So this has said that it's been done. If I open up my Slack, we can see it here, and then I can open the document as it was, the exact same version as I had last time. And that pretty much concludes the video. So I know there's probably a couple of additional steps that we can do beyond this, but I spent a few hours on it, and I'm quite keen to sort of wrap it up. I think that the crux of what we're trying to do, which is create the content from the inputs at the start, is pretty much there. But we could send it directly into WordPress, for example, via an if statement, val approve, disapprove. But for me and for our agency, this process is enough. So what I'll do is I will essentially change the, I'll send this to a channel, and then I will send it to a channel with our copy editor in, and it will be up to her to go through and just tidy it up a little bit. And then that's what we need for the agency.